Hello and welcome back to Parc Fermé Parlay with Kieran Downey. The final race of the 2024 season has just ended. We have a new Constructors champion. Well done to McLaren. We'll obviously come on to that later. What a race that was. I was a little bit worried that we were maybe in for somewhat of a boring race, but there was spice from start to finish. Brilliant racing from start to finish, up and down the grid. Obviously a few drivers that weren't so lucky and didn't manage to finish. We'll obviously come on to them as well. A thrilling end to a thrilling season. And 2024 will definitely go down in the history books as a brilliant Formula One season. I have absolutely no doubt, especially with the outcome of Max Verstappen getting his fourth title, fourth in a row, and with McLaren getting their first championship since 1998. Like, it's been a very long time, and the payoff is huge. The celebrations, I imagine, will be massive down at McLaren tonight. Brilliant racing from that team this year. As I said, we'll come on to that a little bit. Now, before we get into the final race of the 2024 season, I would like to congratulate Gabriel Bortoleto, who is your 2024 Formula 2 champion, joining the ranks of Charles Leclerc, George Russell, Felipe Drugovich, Teo Pourchaire, Oscar Piastri, Nick De Vries, and many others who have won that championship. So congratulations to him. He is obviously moving up to F1 next year in the Cyber car alongside Nico Hülkenberg. And for both those drivers, I'm kind of glad that Cyber seem to have found something in that car, because in these last few races, genuinely this last like 3-4 races, they have managed to sort of compete towards the back end of the point positions, not actually gaining any points apart from Zhou Guan Yu's few last time round, but coming very close. So very glad that they have found some kind of performance in that car, and hopefully will continue to find performance into 2025, so that Gabriel Bortoleto and Nico Hülkenberg can really put a decent fight in next year. It's great to have another F2 champion moving into Formula One. We've obviously got Charles Leclerc, George Russell, Oscar Piastri. We don't obviously have Teo Pourchaire, who just wrong place, wrong time. And Felipe Drugovich, who I genuinely think should be on the grid. But as I said before, I don't control the driver pairings down at Aston Martin. But if I did, he would be one of them. I do feel a bit bad for his championship rival Isaac Hadjar, who didn't really manage to put in a fight in that last race. He had issues getting off the line and spent the majority of the final race for the Formula 2 championship one lap down, which is not how he would have wanted to end his season. But I do imagine we will get confirmation coming very soon that he could be moving up to F1. I imagine that will be the outcome, because the words that were said by Perez at the end of this race indicate that we may not see him next year. Come on to Perez when we get all the way down to Red Bull, but let's kick things off with Kevin Magnussen, who qualified 15th, started 14th, finished 16th. Magnussen, not a great final race for the team, to be quite frank. He, right off the line, before they'd even done the formation lap, before the cars had even got to the grid, had been noted by race control for doing a practice start at the end of the pit lane, which was against the race director's notes. There was no further action taken on that. It was actually investigated after the session. No further investigation on that, so he'll be pretty glad for that. Magnussen, unfortunately, didn't really manage to get a jump in at all, really, and had quite an unfortunate end to his race. It didn't actually end his race. He obviously finished P16, but he did have a bit of a collision with Valtteri Bottas about just over half the way through the race. That really just took him out of the race. He wasn't going to be able to do anything from that point onwards. And it is a shame that his last race with the team has ended this way. But you know what? He's had quite the year from his antics at the beginning of the year, with all his crazy driving, getting a race ban, and then getting some decent points in and actually having some generally quite good races towards the end of the year. So well done to Magnussen for that. Just a shame he couldn't really capitalise on anything this time round. All right, moving on to his teammate, who had a bit of a better time out. Nico Hülkenberg, who qualified 4th, started 7th, finished 8th. Now, Hülkenberg did have to take a 3-place grid penalty for overtaking in the pit lane during the... Well, it wasn't even the pit lane, it was the pit exit road, that sort of road that goes down under the track through the tunnel. He was given a 3-place grid penalty for overtaking there because during the qualifying session, he did argue with the stewards that it was due to him needing to get out quicker so that he could set a lap time in, but they didn't believe that it was a justifiable excuse. So that did put him a few places down, but a pretty decent end to Nico Hülkenberg's season. He did manage to get P8, another few points in the bag for the team that he is leaving. And I have to say, I think Nico's had a great season. Starting the year in the team that was dead last, that nobody really expected much of, that had a new team principal, and the trajectory of that team has been great this year. So really looking forward to see what they can do next year. Hülkenberg is obviously off to Sauber, and as I said, I'm glad that they're beginning to find something in that car, and I just hope that he can get some decent finishes next year. I really don't want Hülkenberg to go through what Zhou Guanyu and Valtteri Bottas have gone through this year, with Zhou Guanyu having a nearly pointless and Valtteri Bottas having a pointless campaign. So fingers crossed that that doesn't happen. Now, speaking of the Sauber boys, let's kick things off with Zhou Guanyu, who qualified 17th, finished 15th. Zhou Guanyu was noted for a false start and did get a 5-second penalty. Those penalties, as soon as somebody is noted for a false start, always expect a penalty to come through. The amount of sensors and cameras and everything that are around the grid, you know 100% that if a false start is noted, they will be getting a penalty, because it is always a slam dunk, because it always is the case. So he didn't have a great start, obviously, with his 5-second penalty, which meant when he came in to serve it, it obviously put him towards the back of the grid. He was running fairly all right. He was in the sort of lower mid-teens, and I kind of wondered whether there might be something. Oh, no, to be fair, I'm just going to say I think if maybe another safety car or something had happened, somebody else had sort of retired, he might have been able to get up a few more places. But that 5-second penalty just stuck him to the back of the grid, and he was never going to be able to get his way through. So that is Zhou Guanyu. Is this the last we see of Zhou Guanyu? I believe if we see him next year, it is in a reserve driver role. There's talk of him maybe going to Ferrari. So potentially we might see him there. It's a shame that his final year has ended this way in a near pointless campaign. Thank God he scored points that last time out in Qatar, because had the team scored 0 points, it would have just been, it'd have been depressing, to say the least. And it is a little bit depressing for Valtteri Bottas, who qualified 9th, did not finish. I was so hoping for a great result for him. I really, really was. He had a phenomenal qualifying, getting that Sauber into Q3, and really just, I was like, here we go. He's going to get something. He's going to get something and finish his final season with anything, just anything. Unfortunately, that was not the case, and he DNF'd. At the start of the race, he managed to get off the line and sort of escape any issues there, but down at turn 6, that really tight, after that first long straight, that really tight chicane, he had a bit of a collision with Perez. He ruined Perez's race, which caused a safety car and did land him with a 10-second penalty. So he would have been fairly like his teammate. He would have been at the back of the grid after that, but had a huge lockup going into turn 1, I believe it was, and ran straight into the side of Kevin Magnussen. I think Magnussen was going around the outside of turn 1. Bottas had a huge lockup and just went into the side of Magnussen. He then had to retire. A very sad end to potentially his Formula 1 career. We don't know if we'll see him back. He's not going to be on the grid for next year. He has openly said that the it seems to be that the people at Red Bull don't like him, so I can't imagine he'll be in contention for the Red Bull seat, especially with all the praise that's been getting heaped on Isaac Hadjar. I think if anyone was going to be moving into that team, it would be Hadjar, even though he is one of the Red Bull juniors. And then there's no other seats really available. It does seem that he may take a year out. He could end up moving to Cadillac for 26 if they want someone experienced. There is everything to say he might be there. There was talk of a reserve role potentially at Mercedes, which, listen, I really like Valtteri Bottas. I think he's a great driver, but I don't think he should be getting offered a reserve role at Mercedes. I think that there is junior talent in that team that they need to be, like, why would they not give it to Frederick Vesti? Isn't he already their reserve driver? It just doesn't make sense to replace him with Valtteri Bottas. Maybe they'll have two. I don't know. But so it could be curtains on Bottas's career. He is doing this whole what next social media thing, so God knows what he's going to do. He's been doing Ironmans in his house, and he's always got something up his sleeve. So we'll see what happens. But it's a very sad end to his current F1 career, having a completely pointless campaign and having no points on his final race and actually retiring from his final race. So I feel, it's a shit end for him. He does deserve a little bit better. But Valtteri Bottas also leaves Formula One with a penalty that he may never serve. He could be very a la Jenson Button and pick up a penalty on his final race that he just doesn't serve. He got a 5th-place grid drop for his next race, for his collision with Magnussen. As I said, doubt he's ever going to be serving that. You do have to kind of wonder what the point of giving those penalties are, because he's obviously never going to serve it. So what's the point in giving a 5th-place grid drop when the driver's not going to be racing again? Unless he takes that reserve role at Mercedes and then, has to step in because George Russell's got the flu and he's got a grid drop then. Who knows? I also reckon Valtteri Bottas is pretty glad to be getting out of that Sauber team, because he has said that it was a mistake joining that team. I think he joined when Fred Vasseur was obviously team principal, and I think he had a load of plans, and when Vasseur left and went to Ferrari, it all went tits up for him. So I imagine he is fairly happy to be waving ta-ra to Sauber. That's all really for Valtteri Bottas. Now moving on to Visa Cash App RB, or as they will be known next year, Racing Bulls. Liam Lawson, who qualified 12th, finished 17th. Now, Liam actually didn't finish the race, but he had done more than, I think it's 75%, something like that you need to do of a race distance to be classified as having finished the race. So he had an all right, he wasn't really going to be getting any points, let's be honest. He did get a 10-second stop and go penalty, which I actually think for Liam to be penalised is maybe a bit much. I do think it was more of a team error than it was him. He came into the pits, he was jacked up, they did his tyres, they released the car, the light went green, he went, but his front left tyre wasn't actually on properly, and on his outlap he was like, my tyre's not on, I need to come back to the pits. Came back in, they changed the tyre, but the FIA absolutely hate drivers going out there with wheels that aren't secured properly onto the car. They absolutely hate it. So I'm not surprised it was a 10-second stop and go penalty. And then he retired. And I don't actually know what happened to the car, but on the final lap, it might not have been his final lap. I don't think he did the final lap, but it was shown he had just pulled over. The RB had smoke coming out of it and was just sort of rolling ever so gently away as he got out of the car. So I'm not entirely too sure what happened to him. What did RB say? Yeah, they haven't actually put anything out about why he didn't finish the race. Technically didn't actually finish the race, but he was also classified as finishing because he'd done anyway. So not really too sure what happened there. Not a great time for Liam Lawson, to be honest with you. Again, the retirement is obviously a mechanical thing, not his issue, but he was going to be finishing at the back of the pack anyway because of that 10-second stop and go penalty. Next up, his teammate Yuki Tsunoda, who qualified 11th, finished 12th. Tsunoda had a terrible start to the race, and actually, to be fair, for him to get P12 is pretty decent, I will say, because when the lights went green, or the lights went out, sorry, at the start of the race, his car went into anti-stall, and he could not get that car moving. He couldn't get about 3 or 4 times, I think, it hit anti-stall. He did manage to get the car going, and for him to get P12, I will say, is a pretty decent outing for Yuki, considering the fact that he was pretty much at the back of the pack for the race start. I think had Yuki not had that issue at the start, he would have been fighting for points. And definitely points could have been on the card for him. RB have finished 8th in the Constructors, and it is quite a shame considering the fact that both those other teams have been able to score points. And for such a long time, we're fighting for 8th, and it's just kind of slipped away from them a little bit. So pretty poor end to the season for RB. Who's their driver for next year? We have no idea. It could be Yuki and Liam. Could be Liam and someone else. Could be Yuki and someone else. We've got no idea who is moving to RB, but I imagine by the end of next week we will have confirmation. All right, to another driver that had a pretty poor outing, unfortunately, is Franco Colapinto, who qualified 19th, started 20th, did not finish. Colapinto obviously had a 5-place grid penalty because he had taken a new gearbox, so he was obviously starting at the back of the pack, and I kind of had hopes that he might be able to do a wee sort of Colapinto special that he's sort of been known for, but he really just gets his elbows out and he's not afraid of the drivers that have been in these cars for however many years now and have raced in F1 for whatever. He doesn't care about any of that. He just goes for it. So I was really hoping for Colapinto to end his tenure at Williams on a high. He's obviously not leaving the team fully. He'll still be a Williams junior, but he just won't be part of the F1 team. I imagine he'll go back to Formula 2 for the year and then try and gain entry into 26. But he had a pretty unfortunate incident, a wee collision with Oscar Piastri on the race restart after the virtual safety car from Perez's retirement, which led to a puncture. He came in, got new tyres, he was obviously at the back of the pack, was managing to sort of make up some positions, but then was told to retire the car because there was obviously some sort of internal damage to it. And it was a very bittersweet moment, I imagine, for Colapinto. He's obviously loved racing in Formula One. He actually came over the radio and, you know, he was like, I understand. He thanked the Williams team for the opportunity. He thanked the team actually before, I think it was on the formation when they were sat waiting to go. He had said, you know, thank you so much, guys, for this like dream come true. And for giving him the chance. And then he thanked them all again. James Vowles even came over the radio and was like, it's been an absolute pleasure and this is not how we wanted you your time racing with us to end, but unfortunately they can't go on any further. So a shame for Colapinto. Very excited to see what he does do with his career, because I can't imagine it's the last we see of him. He is definitely a rising star in Formula One, so I imagine we will see him back quicker than we would imagine. Next up, his teammate Alex Albon, who qualified 16th, started 18th, finished 11th. Albon also took a new gearbox, so he was punted to the back. He actually started just in front of Charles Leclerc because he did qualify slightly better than Colapinto, so he didn't have to go right. Honestly, I didn't really understand why Leclerc wasn't starting from the back when his was a 10-place grid pen. I don't know, but it is what it is. The FIA obviously made that decision that Leclerc could start in front of Colapinto, but would start behind Albon. I'll be completely honest. I don't think I seen Albon once during the broadcast, to be quite frank. I generally don't think I seen him once. I couldn't tell you what kind of race he had. He's obviously had a pretty decent... Listen, he's managed to make up some decent positions. He's nearly finished in the points, so well done to Albon. He's obviously capitalised on quite a few retirements, one being his own teammate, and is just there to kind of pick up the pieces. And man, it's been a shit year for Williams, I have to say, and it's a shame they couldn't end on a high with scoring a few points. They sort of had a really bad... Their sort of trajectory was going down, and then it kind of leveled out, and then it went down, and then they punted Logan Sargent, and then it looked like it was just going up, 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 and then it's just again. So I feel bad for the Williams team, especially those goddamn mechanics. My God, they've had a rough year with the amount of times they've had to fix those cars. Listen, it's great that Albon managed to keep it on the track. Didn't really involve himself in any incidents. Honestly, I think at this point for Williams, they just wanted to bring a car home in one piece. Genuinely, just go a race without damaging a car. Just bring us at least one. And Albon managed to do that. So, well done for keeping his nose out of trouble. Thank God the car didn't blow up on him. God knows the amount of times it's been fixed, something might have happened. He'll be, fingers crossed, for a better year. But obviously, next year, I can't imagine Williams is going to be that much better, because these are only going to be slight evolutions of the cars they've already got. They've got huge reg changes coming in 26. They can't afford to be doing mad changes on these cars for next year, because Williams don't really have the resources for that. So we shall see what happens next year. I bet he's very glad this year is over. All right, next up is Pierre Gasly, who qualified 6th, started 5th, finished 4th. Now, Gasly did move up a grid space because Nico Hülkenberg obviously took his penalty, so he had to move down. Pierre Gasly has had a phenomenal comeback this year, because that Alpine was an absolute tractor at the beginning of the year. It was awful. And they have gone through some really tough races, some tough months. And then just in the final part of this year, he's pulled it back. And it was great watching him out there today. Absolutely loved it. I've loved watching him these past few races. He's been phenomenal. And finishing with more points in the bag. Like, I'm so happy that he's managed to get some decent points these last few races. What I will say about Pierre Gasly is, and I really do appreciate from him, he knew what his race was today. He knew who he was racing. He was stuck there at the front of the grid with your Max Verstappen, your Carlos Sainz, your Landos and Oscars just up the road. He could see them. And he could have very easily just gone for, I'm going to go put my all into this and try and get a race win. But he didn't. And he understood what he was doing. And when these drivers either appeared behind him, he didn't try and fight them. He knew his race was with the Haas boys, with the RBs, and he wasn't going to jeopardize his own race to go and fight for something that was probably going to be out of reach. Let's be completely honest. He was never going to get a podium today. What he was trying to do was just outscore Haas and RB. He did that. Pierre Gasly secured Alpine P6 in the Constructors. And at the beginning of the year, nobody thought that would happen. Now listen, I understand Esteban Ocon also put in some solid points into that team, but the team decided to get rid of him. That's a different story, argument, whatever altogether. Gasly has consistently scored that team decent points in the past few races and actually managed to get them a P6, has been really instrumental in getting them that. And I'm so glad that he didn't do anything stupid today. Realised who his fight was with and put his all into that fight. And even when Charles Leclerc was bombing it up the order, absolutely just picking cars off, Gasly didn't even really hold Leclerc up because that wasn't his fight. When Leclerc got onto his gearbox, Gasly moved and let Leclerc through. He understood his assignment. He did brilliantly out there today. And I'm so glad he managed to score decent points for that team. I'm actually very glad, and I never thought I would say this, that Alpine managed to come 6th. Very glad, because I just wanted Gasly to do well, and he did phenomenal out there. So, well done, Pierre Gasly. Phenomenal work out there. Now, his teammate for the race, his only race of the 2024 season, Jack Doohan, who qualified 20th, started 17th, finished 15th. Now, Doohan obviously moved up a few positions because he had Colapinto, Albon, Leclerc all getting punted behind him because of their grid penalties. I know I said in my predictions that I think Jack Doohan would score points. It wasn't on the cards for him. He did good out there. It was, I think the team probably were relying on him just to bring the car home in one piece, and that there was maybe like a little agreement made beforehand that it was probably going to be almost like a test run for him. Go out there in the machinery, your first time being competitive in an F1 car. He's obviously driven F1 cars, he's done loads of testing sessions for them, but just go out there in a competitive session, don't do anything stupid, bring the car home in one piece and just get a feel for it. Almost use it as a preparation for next year when you're doing this full time. One race at the end of the season, you know, Gasly is more than capable of securing P6. He's just gone and done that. We're in a very good position where we can score enough points. I'm speaking as Alpine here, can score enough points to secure that. You just go out there and get a feel for it. And that's what he did. And listen, P15, well done, mate. Do you know what I mean? You didn't finish last. Although if he'd finished last when Lawson did have a 10-second stop and go penalty, I would have been surprised. But I don't really have much else to say for Doohan. He went out, he didn't crash his car, he didn't get involved in any incidents, he brought it home, he's done his little bit of testing, he's got a feel for it, and now he knows what it feels like to be competitive in this car. He can take that into 2025 and go for it. The team will look at where his strengths were, where his weaknesses were. They'll create a plan for him now over the winter break and really sort of hammer out the kinks in him to try and make him a better all-round driver. It's what they'll have done with Oliver Bearman. It's what they've done with, well, Kimi Antonelli's not done a competitive session, but it's what they do in these practice sessions with the rookies that are going to be moving up. So, well done, Jack Doohan. That's all I've really got to say. Okay, and next up is Lance Stroll, who qualified 13th, finished 14th. Normally, I would look at that and say, oh, Lance Stroll, another pretty shit race. But actually, he was doing exactly what the team told him to do. He was doing his job out there, and his job was hold up Oscar Piastri as best as you can to allow Alonso to really sort of score some decent points. And he did that to the best of his ability. Obviously, at a point, there does become a point where Oscar Piastri is going to get past you. I would say Oscar Piastri is a better driver than Lance Stroll, but he did it perfectly. When they pitted Oscar Piastri, they pitted Lance Stroll. He didn't whine and moan and complain about it. He did what the team told him to do, what the team needed from him, and that was cover off Oscar Piastri to allow Alonso to go. And that's what happened. So, in that respect, fairly decent. The one thing I am confused about is he did get a 5-second penalty for leaving the track without any justifiable reason. A whole load of times. So many times. He was never. I actually think Lance Stroll spent more time off the track than he did on the track. He was shown a black and white flag. He was told to stop doing that, and then he just kept going, so they gave him a penalty for track limits. I do believe that his penalty was added to his final race time because I think it came after he'd done his pit stop. But I don't really have much to say for Lance Stroll other than the fact that he did what the team needed him to do. And in that regard, yeah, well done. He sacrificed whatever he thought he may be able to achieve and put his best foot forward for the team. And it is a team sport at the end of the day. They are drivers that are employed by a team. So he did what he needed to do. Now, his teammate, Fernando Alonso, who qualified 8th, finished 9th. So glad he managed to score some points. My God, I'm so glad. Jesus Christ. As I said, he was getting some help from his teammate. I will say fantastic teamwork going on down at Aston Martin to get Fernando Alonso those points. And it worked because he managed to finish ahead of Oscar Piastri, and that is what the team wanted. And it worked out in his favour. So well done to Lance Stroll and Fernando Alonso on some great teamwork. As I said, finished P9, finishing the year with a couple of points. Well done, Alonso. I bet he's also ready for a new car next year. I think he's pretty over that car. But again, don't know how much different it will be because obviously they do have big reg changes coming in 26. So I can't imagine there'll be huge differences. But I also imagine he's pretty glad that Adrian Newey is joining and they've put so much development into this with the new factories, new wind tunnels, and hiring of all these key personnel to put the right people in the right places to really, they are now gunning for championships and they are putting the work and the effort and putting their money where their mouths are to get that. So I bet Alonso's pretty happy to be seeing that. All right, moving on to our Constructors champions. Oscar Piastri qualified 2nd, finished 10th. And Lando Norris, who qualified 1st, finished 1st. I'm going to stick them together because we are going to talk a little bit about the Constructors as well. But let's kick things off with Oscar Piastri. I generally thought we were going to get McLaren 1-2. I thought we would get McLaren 1-2. It was an easy McLaren 1-2. And poor Oscar got absolutely punted by Verstappen on that first corner. Red Bull will see it one way, McLaren see it the other way. I do see it as being a bit of Max's fault. He did steam it up the inside into turn 1 and probably caught Oscar by surprise. And it did. It's an unfortunate lap 1 incident. I would have maybe put it down to a racing incident. But the stewards didn't think that, and the stewards gave Max a penalty. We'll come on to that shortly. But it did send Oscar into spin. He did then rejoin at the back of the pack. There was then obviously the collision between Bottas and Perez, which ended Perez's race and caused the virtual safety car. On that restart, Piastri did have a collision with Colapinto, which ruined Colapinto's race and got him a 10-second penalty for causing a collision. Piastri, that is, not Colapinto. Piastri's entire race then just became get P10. Just get P10. As long as you've got P10, we can make the rest of it work. That seemed to be what McLaren's game plan was. Claw some kind of points out of this race to help them, because at this point, remember, Leclerc is absolutely firing it through the pack. Like, he is just picking drivers off left, right and centre. And there was probably a real worry down at McLaren that Leclerc was going to really get up into the podium positions. Carlos was then just going to pick off Lando Norris and, oh, goodbye constructors, you know what I mean? Like, ta-da, maybe next year. There was such a worry that they just needed Oscar to get some points. And he did. He did have a great race after all of his penalties and what have you. Probably a great recovery for Oscar Piastri. A shame he got caught up in that turn 1 incident. What I will say is I do love a sassy Piastri with his radio message. It was like, yep, move of a world champion, that one. And then obviously the collision with Colapinto was really his fault, but that is what it is. What I will say, it is a sign of a great racer that he didn't let that get to him. I don't know if Oscar has it in him to really be affected by these things. I think the man's just constantly cool. Like, he's just so chill. I've never really seen him worked up. All his radios are just like that turn 1 incident. Loads of the drivers would have been swearing, blinding. Oh, Oscar just gives a little bit of a sassy message and on he goes. The man's just so chill, and he's managed to keep his head and just really go for it and score a point at the end of the day. So well done to Piastri for that. His teammate Lando, phenomenal work, I must say. Phenomenal work for Lando Norris to keep his cool and really deliver that team the Constructors' Championship. Because after that turn 1 incident, the amount of pressure and everything that Lando would have been feeling to secure them that championship would have been immense. Would have been so immense. And he did as well, keep his cool. He went out there, he raced solidly, he maintained his lead, he didn't let Carlos Sainz pressure him, and there was points when I thought Carlos is just going to absolutely steam it here and just pick Lando off. And he kept his cool, kept his calm, and just delivered a beautiful race win to secure the championship. So well done, Lando Norris. That was brilliant. That was just brilliant to watch. And do you know something? As much as I had said, oh, I want Ferrari to win, and I really did want Ferrari to win, but my God, I'm so happy for McLaren. I'm so happy for McLaren. They have had a brilliant season this year. And yes, there's been some low points, and we will talk about them when we come on to do our highs and lows of the season. But they've had a great year, and Lando has had a great year. They have come into this year with what was one of the worst cars in 23 to becoming up there with one of the better cars, to then come in and have probably the most dominant car this year. Lando has secured his first race win. He's then gone and won 3 more races. Like, that is brilliant. Just brilliant. And McLaren went from 4th in the Constructors in 23 to winning the Constructors this year. Their first Constructors win since 1998. Like, in 98, I was 3. I'm 29 now. Do you know what I mean? Like, that's such a long time, and I'm so glad for them. As I said, I think Lando did a brilliant job out there today. Raced perfectly, kept his cool, kept his calm, kept his composure, and just went and delivered the perfect result for McLaren. So well done. Beautiful work from Lando Norris there. And I did enjoy Lando's radio message at the end. He is gunning for the championship win next year. This has given him, he's got a taste of what it's like to start really putting forward a Drivers' Championship campaign, and he's going for it next year. What will be interesting is what happens with Oscar next year, because Oscar will also go into 25 being like, I could be a Drivers' Champion. I've got the machinery. I can go and do this. I can go and win races. I could really put a bid in here for the championship. And we will probably at some point be speaking next year about fucking papaya rules and you know, oh, will they favour Lando? Will they favour Oscar? If one becomes a clear front runner for the championship, will they put resources to that one? Or, you know, there'll be all these kind of conversations probably we'll be having all over again next year. But for right now, well done to Lando Norris, well done to Oscar Piastri, and well done to McLaren for securing a Constructors' Championship for the first time in 26 years. That is brilliant. All right, next up is number 2 in the Constructors' Championship, and that is Ferrari, with Carlos Sainz, who qualified 3rd, finished 2nd, and Charles Leclerc, who qualified 14th, started 19th, finished 3rd. We'll start with Sainz because he had a great jump off the line. He obviously was there to pick up the pieces from when Oscar Piastri got punted, and he just kept his eyes focused ahead of him on the gearbox of Lando Norris. He did sort of fall out a little bit. You know, he sort of dropped back a little bit. I think there was a little bit of tyre management. There was a bit of a gap opened up between him and Lando. But he did a great job of just maintaining position when all the time behind him, there is chaos going on back there. And he just went out, came home, delivered a podium for the team in his final race, put all of that shit that's happened this year to the side, with him basically getting fired at the beginning of the year for Lewis Hamilton, going out there trying to find another race seat, securing one with Williams. And he does say he's very excited to go to Williams and see what they can do and really be part of that. I mean, it will be a brilliant story if he can help get them back up to, you know, championship winning, which will take a long time. And do I think that Sainz will be there for that whole time? That remains to be seen. But he put all of that aside, went out there and delivered a P2 for the team. So well done to Carlos Sainz for that. And what a great end to his tenure at Ferrari. Not what he would have wanted. He did want to help secure them the Constructors' Championship. But it's a shame he's not going to be there next year to really put the fight in from the very beginning again in what is probably going to be a team that he'll be fighting for podiums and race wins right from the very start. So it is a shame. Now, as a Ferrari fan, I would just like to say thank you to Carlos Sainz. Thank you for a great few years since 2021. Thank you for all the laughs, the fun, the great racing, the wins, the podiums. You know, the only non-Red Bull driver to win in 23 was Carlos Sainz. That's huge. Absolutely huge. The first driver that wasn't Red Bull to win this year in Australia. Amazing. Like, it was just, he's had such a great time, and I'm really going to miss him being in the red overalls of the Prancing Horse. But well, I'm quite excited to see what he can do at Williams. I'm not going to lie. Charles Leclerc, my man, what a bloody drive that was. 16 positions he gained. 16 positions from P19 to P3. That is incredible. Watching the replay of his first lap when he navigates that turn 1 incident between Verstappen and Piastri perfectly. He escapes unscathed, and then he's just picking off like multiple cars at a time, and like going into turn 6 on the outside, which is such a tricky move to do on the outside, and picking off like 2-3 cars at once, and then just solidly going and just seeing them off. Like, it was just amazing to watch. He was fire out there. You can tell he was pissed off because of the qualifying and the track limits. And at one point I thought, oh, he's going to get a penalty again. He's going to get a penalty today because he was getting thingied for track limits and was very close to getting a penalty for track limits. But he just, off he went and came home P3. Absolutely nailed that race. Absolutely nailed it. Just a shame that towards the end of the race his tyres had fallen off. He couldn't really continue to really put a fight in. They just didn't have enough to get the Constructors, but oh, so close. So close. And a very well-deserved P3 in the Drivers' Championship. He's had a phenomenal year. And to think, if he just hadn't fallen off in those middle few races, your sort of Silverstones and stuff like that, if he hadn't fallen off and had a few shit races, he could have been P2 in the championship. and Ferrari could have won, but coulda, woulda, shoulda. So that is all there is to say about that. I will say, my God, I felt bad for that man after the race, because you can tell he's just a bit depressed at the result, not being able to get the constructors, because it was so close. And then they go and do the podium, the actual podium, and then he has to go back onto the podium to film scenes for that fucking movie that's coming out next year. I swear to God, if that movie's not decent, I'll be so pissed off. Do you know something? I will say it's probably going to feel quite authentic, because they've been filming it at race weekends. They've been filming it with the actual drivers in the backgrounds or on the podiums and all that kind of stuff, and getting the actual fans and stuff involved at the race weekend. So I'm always wary about these kind of things, and I'm just a bit worried it's going to be shite. But we'll find out in 2025. We'll probably have a whole episode on the podcast about it, about what our thoughts and feelings on the movie were. But yeah, well done to the Ferrari boys. Well done to Charles Leclerc, driver of the day. Was a driver of the day drive indeed. All right, next up, Mercedes. George Russell qualified 7th, started 6th, finished 5th. And Lewis Hamilton, that qualified 18th, started 16th, finished 4th. So George Russell had a fairly all-right race, I will say. I don't think he had any real problems. He did have quite a struggle getting past Pierre Gasly in the opening stint. Obviously, he did manage to get past Gasly, but then Gasly pitted, and it really left him sort of vulnerable to Leclerc, and he handled the pressure well. He pitted, he was flying after that pit stop. I think George Russell's a very smart racer, in that when he came out of the pits and Gasly was ahead of him, he could have tried some crazy moves to get himself past Gasly, but he didn't. He waited, he lined it up perfectly. He didn't go at the first opportunity he got. He waited till he was a little bit closer for the next opportunity, and it was so much easier. So well done. I think he's a very smart driver. He held on to position pretty well. He had Lewis Hamilton coming up beside him, who was on an absolute flyer after his final pit stop, and he was told by Toto, keep it clean with Lewis. You can race, don't just let him through, but keep it clean. We don't want to screw anything up, especially with it being Hamilton's last race. And you know what? A respectful finish for Russell, coming home P5. His teammate Hamilton, I will say, a shit qualifying for 2 reasons. Obviously, the bollard from Magnussen, getting that stuck on the car didn't help, but also just being sent out by the wrong time. Being sent out at the wrong time, by the team. He was on the hard tyre, I think the only driver to be on the hard tyre for the opening stint, and I was a little bit worried because he was really struggling on that hard tyre, really, really struggling on it, but it was obviously the right option for him. He pitted, he managed to go a bit longer, pitted, went on the mediums, and then was absolutely flying on this medium tyre that was the preferred one. Everyone else was on a hard that was struggling, and he was just absolutely gunning it on that final stint. Oh, I just loved the little radio communications between him and Bono, when Bono was like, I've got something up my sleeve here, and I think we could maybe get P3. They pitted him and whatever, and Hamilton just was not sure about it, but Bono had it in the bag. He had it in the bag, and here he went and got P3. I'm fucking pissed off, though, that for the last race of them together, Bono did say it was like, switch to Strat 5 or whatever, and it's hammer time, and they didn't fucking play it. Jesus Christ, we've all been asking for one thing in their final race together, is for him to say it, and you just didn't play it. Sky. Bloody hell. That final lap, he lined up Russell perfectly. It was brilliant watching him set up that overtake, managed to get Russell in the final few corners and came home P4. And it was just brilliant. Absolutely loved watching that. That is why he is. That is Lewis Hamilton level of racing. It was brilliant to watch. And yeah, that's his final race with Mercedes done. And do you know something? What a race. It all looked like it had gone tits up. To be fair, in practice, they were doing pretty all right. And then it was a Q1 exit, and I was like, oh, he's going to have a terrible last race, and this is just not going to feel the same because it is such a shit race. And then he goes and gains 12 positions during the race, because it's just going to be a terrible race for him, and then he goes and gains 12 positions during the race, comes home P4. Honestly, you could have asked for better, because better would have been him winning the race in a season where he has really struggled, or in a few seasons where he's really struggled and hasn't had the best car and didn't enjoy racing with that car. He's done a great job, and that's curtains on his Mercedes career, the most successful partnership. And I would actually agree with Martin Brundle, probably in sport, the most successful partnership in sport, not just in Formula One. And anyway, well, that's it over. His radio message at the end was really sweet as well. He'd said something like, you know, we dreamed alone, but together we believed. What started out as a leap of faith turned into a journey for the history books. And it is, he's so right. It is one for the history books. It is an incredible partnership they've had. And listen, I understand that it is obviously the end of an era, but I do also think it was maybe played as if it was him leaving the sport altogether, with him being able to park on the grid at the end of the race and all this kind of stuff. And it's like, he is only going a few doors down to Ferrari. He's not actually retiring. So I can imagine, to be fair, I imagine that when he does retire, it'll be an even bigger spectacle. But that's it. He's out. He's done. And do you know something? I would say that as much as he hates that car, he's obviously a very respectable man. I think had that been Fernando Alonso, Fernando would have gotten out the car on the grid and set fire to it. Well done to Lewis Hamilton on a great comeback. All right, finally is Red Bull. And we can sort of fire through these ones quickly because we've got Sergio Perez, who qualified 10th, did not finish. Perez had an unfortunate incident with Valtteri Bottas at turn 6, and it ended his race. Now, it did cause a VSC. He was out, and that was it for his last race. And probably his last race, not only this season, but probably with this team. Because the comments that were made after the race to the media seemed to kind of hint that he's out. He was asked by the media if he would be back racing with the team again next year. I feel like every weekend they just keep asking the same question, because every weekend there's just another bad performance or another bad qualifying or something. And he was asked again after his retirement, and he'd said, I do have a contract, but we'll need to sit down after this weekend and speak with the team and see what they want to do. And, you know, reach an agreement with what works best for the team, not just for Perez. And it kind of feels like it's tennis balls being batted backwards and forwards. Like Horner saying it's up to Checo, what Checo wants to do. He's got the contract. What does he want to do if he wants to continue racing? And you had Perez saying, I've got contract, I'm not going anywhere, pretty much. To now saying, well, I'm throwing the ball back over to his side of the court because, you know, I've got the contract, but we'll see what Red Bull want to do. I think he's out. I reckon by this time next week, we'll know that Perez is gone, to be quite frank. I think it was maybe quite sweet in a way of Horner to say, oh, do you know, we'll let Perez decide what he wants to do. He's an adult. When I also imagine the stakeholders must be saying, get him out. Like, we've just lost a load of money. All right, great. We've got some wind tunnel time. Amazing. But we've just lost a championship and a load of money. And all the mechanics and stuff would have lost bonuses. Like, all the team members have just probably lost a huge bonus because they've lost the Constructors' Championship. So there's probably a lot of pissed off people in that team with Perez. I think it's Tara Perez. As I said, he does have a contract, but in that contract, it doesn't say that he needs to be a competitive driver. He can be like somebody that goes and does like show runs and all this kind of stuff. He doesn't need to be driving competitively. So I generally think it's Tara Perez and probably hello Liam Lawson into the Red Bull seat. That's what I'm thinking there. And then Max Verstappen, a driver who you'd think at this point would maybe just be like, I've got my championship. I've qualified in a half-decent position. I'm just going to go out there and not make any mad moves. But that's not Max Verstappen. And Max Verstappen, as I said, steamed it down the inside, caused a collision with Oscar Piastri. He did get a 10-second penalty for that. He served it in the pits. And Verstappen just, I think, hates the stewards at the moment. And what was it he'd said? Oh, he was coming out of the pits and he was like, oh, could we ask for 20 seconds, stupid idiots? And like, all right, okay, like, I get it, but you're better than that, Max. Like, you are actually better than that. There's no need to be, these guys are literally just following a rule book. and you don't need to take it out on the stewards. So I didn't enjoy that from Max, to be completely honest. That being said, after that, he did just run a pretty all-right race. Not a Max Verstappen special is what we are usually accustomed to. He was kind of struggling on his tyres a little bit, so probably why he didn't really manage to attack. A decent result to get P6, and I'm intrigued to know what's going to happen next year now, because what happens with this car? They obviously don't have Adrian Newey anymore. He was taken off the sort of Formula One project. His whole project was to deliver the hypercar. So what happens with their car? Where do they take that car? Obviously, they've got a whole big team of people at that factory that are working on these machines. So I'm intrigued to see where that sort of car goes. Will Verstappen be in the fight for a championship next year? I'm going to say yes. Even I think you could give Verstappen a shit car and he will haul that car around and get a podium. You cannot count that man out, no matter what machinery he's in. He is an incredibly talented driver, so I definitely would put him in the mix for fighting for a championship next year. I think we've got 5 teams that could probably be fighting for a championship. Mercedes, Red Bull, McLaren, Ferrari. 4. Comfortably 4. Potentially Aston Martin. But with that, you've obviously got Max, Lando, Oscar, Lewis, Charles, George, like 6 drivers all fighting for a championship next year, which is going to be very, very exciting. But intrigued to see what they can do with that car. And that is everything from the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix and the close of the 2024 Formula One season. I can't believe it's over. We still have more to discuss from the 2024 season. We have our driver ratings. Yes, that's right. We did our mid-season driver ratings in the summer break, but now it is time for us to rate the drivers for their full F1 2024 season. That is all 24 drivers that have taken part in a race this year. That is including Logan Sargent, even though he only did one race after the mid-season ratings. Franco Colapinto, Jack Doohan, Liam Lawson's back in there, but we've kept Daniel Ricciardo as well because he also did some races after the summer break. In the description box down below, I have left a link that will take you to our driver ratings page. 1 to 10, 1 being a poor, terrible time, 10 being they've had the best season ever. We've also got a bit in there for your highs and lows of the season. I want to know what your favourite moments were from the 2024 season. Was it Lewis's win at Silverstone? Was it the McLaren Championship? Was it Max's Championship? Was it Charles winning in Monaco or Monza? Was it Lando's first win? Was it Alex Jacques' commentary in Monaco? Because that is one of mine. Let me know what your favourite moment was, and also let me know what your least favourite moment was. Was it some of Max Verstappen's driving? Was it some of Crofty's commentating, because it was a bit ropey? Was it Daniel Ricciardo getting punted? Let me know what your least favourite moment was, along with your favourite. We'll also be back with any news coming out of the sport over the winter break. As I said, I imagine Perez being one thing. And that is us for Abu Dhabi and our final race review of the 2024 season. So thank you very much. If you're watching on YouTube, please make sure to subscribe and follow along. If you are listening wherever you get your podcasts, Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon, make sure to follow along as well. And make sure to follow along on social media at Parc Fermé Parlay on Threads, TikTok, Instagram, Blue Sky, for all the updates coming out of the best sport in the world. But that is everything from us. We'll see you soon. Enjoy the rest of your day. Love you. Bye.